Hi everyone, it's Tonya Gibbs, and today I want to share with you a mixed media layout process video featuring the May 2015 Sketch and Dare Challenge by Die-namites Dies. Here is a glimpse at the sketch that I drew for the May challenge, and then today I'm going to use the Leafy Flowers die, the Spring Doily die, and the Dragonfly Frenzy die. So the idea for this challenge is that you use at least one Die-namites dies and use the sketch as a reference. You can be as loose with it or as to the letter with it as you would like, and then link up your post before the end of the month for a chance for a drawing. So I will put a link down below for all the details to where you can go to get information about how to participate in the contest. So to start with, for my paper collection today, I am going to use the Prima Tea Time paper collection, and I've started out with the Charmeuse pink. It's the B side, I guess, of that paper collection, and I've added some gesso to it, and I have used my Prima Distress tool to distress up the edges. And the idea here is I'm going to layer it on top of the exact same page, but use the A side as my background. So I've also gessoed up some hymnal pages, a book page, and then a piece of craft paper that was just in my stash. And I'm going to back the pink paper with a piece of chipboard that was cut 8 inches. I think it's 8 by, or no, it's 10 by 10, and the pink paper I cut to 11 by 11, so everything has like roughly a ½ inch border all the way around whenever I place it down. So the chipboard is just going to help to keep it really sturdy with all of the elements that I'm going to add to the top of that. This is actually going to hang on my wall in my hallway, so I want it to be very dimensional because I'm going to place it inside of a frame. So now I'm just going to use my Prima Distress tool to distress up those edges one more time around the outer part of the paper, and then I'm going to use the flat side of the distress tool to just rough up the pink paper as well, and then that's just going to give it a little more texture. Now I'm going to take my fingers and just kind of curl up those edges around the pink so it's really dimensional looking. This is some extra lace that I've had in my stash, and I decided with the sketch there's just a lot of boxes drawn on the sketch in the background. So what I decided to do was take the sketch in a literal sense and create all of these boxes with texture. So the idea here was I'm going to use a lot of fabric, some book pages, some hymnal pages, this craft paper, and everything's going to get whitewashed with the gesso and just kind of ripped, tattered, torn. Everything's going to have just a really tattered look to it. My thought process for this was that if you were having a tea party in a garden, that you would see these lace overlays on top of the tables. The napkins would have this nice linen feel to them, so that's where the canvas comes in. But the idea was really just texture. A garden, thinking about gardens and tea parties and texture. This is a photo of my niece, Amber, and it is going to be the focal point of today's layout. Again, all of these elements that you see me layering one on top of the other were all from the scrap pile. Then I've also taken out the Spring Doily die from Die-namites Dies, and I've cut it out of white cardstock, and it's going to be sitting on the right hand side. And in the sketch there's like a circle with the flowers in the center of it, so I thought I would use the doily for my circle element. And then I just fussy cut out some of the roses from the paper collection to cluster there on top of my circle. So now I have the Dragonfly Frenzy die that I have pre-gessoed the paper, let it dry, and then I die cut the paper out with the die. This way the surface is prepped, so anything I want to add to it I certainly can. I decided to go ahead and color this with the Ranger Distress Markers, and the Evergreen Bow is the color that I used on the dragonflies. Vintage Photo was the center of their bodies, and then Bundled Sage was the leaves that are in that collection. And then this is just a piece from the paper collection that has some words on it. I think it says it has a reference to gardening and then heirloom roses. So it was just a really nice element to hide that transition between the burlap or between the canvas and the paper there. Just above my flower arrangement. So then I decided everything needed a little sparkle and shine. So I grabbed out my Lindy Stamp Gang. This is the Creme Brulee Cream, and I've spritzed it all around. I like this because it has kind of a white pigment in it, but the shimmer in it is a gold. So it's kind of opalescent, and I really love that look. So I also spritzed my Dragonfly Frenzy with that so that my dragonflies have a really nice iridescence to them as well. Now I'm going to cut the die apart. I encourage you when you're working with your dies that sometimes whenever they are in one piece, they're a little too bulky. Don't be afraid to cut them if you need to. Now, this is just a tag that I am going to use for my journaling. When I hang layouts on my wall, I don't typically add my journaling where you can read it, but I do like to have it there. So, in this particular instance, this layout will not have a title or journal that is visible simply because it's going to be wall art. And those are just things that are great for scrapbooking, but for this, I'm treating this more like a canvas. So in this case, I didn't necessarily need to have a title. But what I will do, just so that you know, I do add the who, what, when, where, and why of the event either on this tag or I will add it to the back of the layout. So future reference, 10 years from now, we'll be able to identify that this is Amber and not her baby sister, Emily. So anyway, all I've done is kind of tuck some things in here and there. And then I'm using this piece of chipboard as a pocket for my tag to slip in and out of. I do not like to use hot glue on the back of my photographs because it will kind of warp them. So I've just added some score tape to the top of that and then placed my photo in. And again, I've cut that Dragonfly Frenzy in half, and I'm using half on the left and half on the right. And now you'll see me tucking that tag up at the top. So again, my journaling will be hidden behind the photograph and that tag. This is a piece of the paper collection that I cut off whenever I made the frame. So I just distressed the edges of it, and I'm going to tuck it there and hide some of the words from the book page and the hymnal page. I like seeing the actual music notes, but I didn't want to see the words that were there. So that's kind of what I'm thinking here. And then also, I noticed that in my layout, I had a lot of layers of boxes, but since I've added a bulky photo, I've kind of covered up some of that look. So these little lines and little pieces that I'm adding now will sort of reinforce the boxes that you saw in the sketch. So now I've decided to take a piece from the base or the back side of one of the papers that has the flowers on the front. I believe that is the Shelley has the big flowers. Again, it's the same paper collection, and cut one of the tags out, and I'm going to put it there on the left. I like to use small elements like this when there's a hard transition between layers. For example, where the hymnal page starts and stops versus where the canvas starts and stops. The tag just sort of helps to make that transition a little softer. So this is the Leafy Flowers die that I've cut from the green paper, which is the Kersey paper, and I had fussy cut out that flower cluster from that same paper, so I'm using it to die cut my dies, and that way everything matches really nicely. I've spritzed it again with that creme brulee, and then now I'm tucking it in around my roses. Notice that I'm lifting up my roses. I'm going to put down my Leafy Flowers die, and then I am going to add a little pop dot behind the flowers, and this is going to help them to sort of elevate a little bit and give them some depth as well, casting a shadow back over my Leafy Flowers die. So here I go again. I got to cut up another sheet of paper. So this, I believe, is the Shelley flowers. The first one was the Kersey. So I'm probably butchering these names. Another tip I want to give you when you're going to use your dies, a lot of times when I have scrap papers that have a white background, or the B side is maybe white or a solid color, and the front side is just something that I'm probably never going to use again. I always use them to cut out my doilies because I know I'm always going to use white doilies on everything. So there's a little tip for you. It doesn't matter what's on the front side if you're going to cover it up anyway. So I like to use the back sides for my die cuts. Again, I'm just cutting this leafy flower die in half and tucking it in over on the left hand side. Where I had placed down my Dragonfly Frenzy on the left, there was just, I didn't like the stem exposed. So what I'm doing is I'm going to build out my cluster going over in that direction, and then I'm going to take these flowers that I've cut from the paper collection and just nest them in around as well in that section of the photograph. It's going to kind of get my floral spray in sort of an L shape around the photo, everything pointing back up to the photo. And this makes it look as if she's in the garden, kind of peekabooing out around a flower trellis. So since she was kind of peeking around a wooden pillar. And again, all of these dies were spritzed with the creme brulee, so they are shiny. I know it's hard to tell in this lighting, but when you see the close-ups, you'll really see how well they look. So I decided on the flower clusters there on the left. I needed to have a little something else added there. They just look too placed. So I went back to my paper collection and I found these little words again. They say there's a reference to like a seed packet, and then I think it says cart hours daily 6 to 7, and then heirloom roses. So I like the look of those in the paper collection and how they were layered on top of the flowers. So I thought I would carry that over into the design of this layout as well, placing them there. So now my tag is good and dry, and I'm going to go ahead and put it back into that pocket there over the photograph, and then remove the string that is there and replace it with a piece of this lace that I'm not, well, before I put the lace in, I found this flower that I had cut in half. It's one of those, I think that's a rayon fabric. And it was just a cluster of little roses that made up a bigger flower. So I had cut it in half for another project. I spritzed it with the creme brulee, and now I'm taking my heat gun and heating it. Well, the heat gun is melting the fabric, and it's also burning the fabric, so they have this really nice vintage look to them now because of the heat gun. And I'm just placing that there under that one flower just to give another little bit of texture there. So I'm going to cover up my photograph and use some of the white gesso watered down really super thin, and I'm using my creme brulee spray to water down that gesso so it has some sparkle to it as well. And then I'm just going to tap it to give it a few dots around. To me, it kind of has that feeling of baby's breath there. So then I decided I needed a few more of those splatters, just a little larger. So again, back to the paint and just really saturate your brush and pounce it so that they fall out. And then I've colored up some of those little pieces from the leafy flower as well with the paint, with that paint. Just dabbing it around. In the sketch, there are some paint splatters, so I thought this would be a really nice way to add another little bit of light to this layout. So here I go adding that little piece of trim there on the top of the tag. I just thought that was a little better. It was a little more feminine than the twine that was on the tag originally. And sorry about the glare on the photograph, guys. I'm not sure I could do too much with that. This is the Prima wheat jute, and I am just making a figure 8 there in my hand until I have enough loops to make a bow. And then I'm going to use a piece of wire to cinch off the center of the bow. It doesn't take much of the wire, but it does give it a really nice clean look. and just twisting it a couple of times, adding a little bit of glue to that as well and sticking it there. I had a little spot of a hole, but I didn't want to cover up all my layers, and I found that this jute twine is light enough to where it gives that added depth, but it doesn't really cover up your layers too much. You can still see through it. So now I've decided I need a wood element. Here I am, I've got all of these paper elements, but I needed another texture. So I've pulled out this dusty attic uh, chipboard piece. This is called Geometric Border, and I love it. It's boxes, but it's still light and airy. So I'm going to lightly dry brush some white gesso over the top of it. Remember, I spritzed that creme brulee into that gesso, so it's a little sparkly now. It's hard to tell in the photograph, but I went ahead and just spritzed over it one more time with the creme brulee just to soften it up a little. Now I'm going to cut the chipboard piece in parts and tuck them in around my flower cluster. To me, it's going to kind of reinforce that trellis idea, but it's still keeping with my squared theme that's in the sketch. So I may have to trim it down just a bit more to get that piece to stick in there. And I love the way it looks. I love the way it just kind of builds out that horizontal, I mean that vertical line, throughout the flower cluster. So just adding some glue there to the back of it. And I'm going to tuck it at the top. And notice that whenever I glued down all of my photograph or all of my elements, I did not completely glue around anything. Everything just has a small spot of glue on it. That is because I want to be able to tuck in things here and there. If you completely glue things down, then you don't have the option for going back and adding layers later. So once again, this is just a little tiny piece of that that I broke off that's going to go there to the right and kind of poke out around that spring doily. I love the spring doily. Guys, if you don't have any dynamite dies, I suggest starting with the spring doily. I've used it more than any other die in my stash. And I'm really loving this Leafy Flowers die too. It's awesome. You can see how well it works as filler for all of your flower arrangements. It's a nice full die. All of these dies cut like butter. I mean, seriously, smooth. I never have problems with any of them cutting ever, and they're very intricate. So there I've flanked it down there at the bottom, and I'm going to try to put this piece over on the other side, but it just got too bulky, so I just decided to leave it out. I can use it on a card or a tag later on, so it will go up into the bucket that you see me reference a lot. Now, for every new thing I use, I always try to use something old, and I wanted to point out that I have had these little charms in my stash forever. They're called Skittles. I think in the early 2000s they were super popular and I bought every single color, and I've never used any of them ever. So it was nice to be able to pull those out and use them here. I'll add them to my layout in just a few minutes. What I'm making right now is a mixture of glossy accents, and then I have the Prima Art Ingredients by Finnabar. This is the glass beads and the glass glitter in sterling, and I'm mixing it up with the glossy accents. One thing you do want to note, if you're going to use something like glass glitter and you want to mix it with the medium, you want to make sure you're mixing it with a glossy medium and not a uh, matte medium, because the glossy is going to help it keep its luster and shine. If you mix it with something that's matte, it's going to kind of dull the finish a little. So I had some glossy accents in that, and it's not really coming out of its bottle like it should, so I'm using it until it's used up. So I'm just taking a popsicle stick and just applying that all around my floral sprays, around the base of my photograph, and it's just going to add a little touch of sparkle around those dull paper elements and really help the whole thing just kind of get a little bit of life. So here I'm going to add my little stickles. I don't know, these used to be called stickles or dewdrops or something. I don't know. Anyway, I have bags and bags of these because I fell in love with them. I had to have every color, and then I never used them again. Once I had them, I never used them. So they're just a nice little sparkle touch there, very dainty. They remind me of the enamel dots that everyone's using, but they are made of they're made of acrylic, so they're very transparent. And I just thought the softness of these was better than the matte finish of the enamel dots. So again, I'm just adding those on with a little spot of hot glue. If you don't like hot glue, you can always use your favorite glue, whatever it is. So here's the close-ups. You can really see that sparkle going on there with the glitter, and then see how the dyes just help to bring that whole flower cluster together. The dragonflies are just the perfect touch, absolute perfect touch. Here's another close-up of this cluster here. You can see all of the different levels that you saw in the sketch with the squares and the rectangles. So my lace and my hymnal pages and all those elements are still building out those squares. And here is the bottom left cluster. Just love how the dragonfly from the Dragonfly Frenzy is just peekabooing out over the top of those rosebuds. Don't forget to, you have till the end of May to submit your project for the Sketch and Dare Challenge. The challenge for this month, or the dare for this month, is to use fabric on your creation. So you need to use the sketch plus the dare, incorporate the dare. So thank you guys so much for hanging out with me today. I will put a link down below to the Die-namites blog where you can get information on how to participate in this challenge, and I will also include links to all of the products used, as well as a link to my blog where you can see the photos close up as well. So thanks for hanging out with me. If you like this production, please be sure to share it with a friend. Give me a thumbs up and leave me a comment.